And then when there's something you want to say, you can unmute again.
All right, thank you very much.
Because I think in the current state, we couldn't speak at all. We couldn't unmute ourselves.
But it hasn't started yet, nay.
Yes, we're still waiting for people to connect.
Don't forget to turn off the sound on your laptop because it's going to create a feedback.
It is off, as in mute. It's muted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like 30 seconds.
Okay.
Unmute versus Bella.
So like 5 seconds.
I think we're good to go. Is it good? Okay, so good day to all our participants, guests and panelists. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We have a fascinating discussion lined up for you. We hope you'll leave the session richer and you'll be as engaging as possible. My name is Kudzo Tsigani from the MDDA's project unit, focusing on digital media, and I'll be your facilitator today. So my role here is to make sure that this session is as engaging as possible and to allow you as participants to contribute meaningfully and to probe the remarks of our panelists. So one of the objectives in the MDDA's Act of 2002 is to support initiatives which promote literacy and a culture of reading. So over the years, we have implemented various media literacy initiatives where participants engage in digital literacy campaigns, reading clubs, media production skills, and media literacy exchange programs. Today, however, under our Love Literacy theme, we'll be exploring the importance of promoting a culture of reading, honing in on literacy as a human rights issue, and also foregrounding the critical issues of mother tongue reading. And to help us unpack all of these issues, we have, from different vantage points, we have our three panelists. So we're joined by three organizations today. The South African Center for Digital Language Resources, SADiLaR. This is a national center supported by the Department of Science and Innovation. Among its many functions, SADiLaR focuses on all South Africa's official languages, supporting research and development in the domains of language technologies and language-related studies. So it'll be interesting to hear from SADiLaR. We also have the National Community Radio Forum, the NCRF. This is a membership-driven association of community radio stations and support service organizations. As we know, community radio stations are independent NPO, non-profit CBOs, owned and run by local communities who actively participate in the development of programming activities. So welcome to the NCRF. And lastly, we'll be joined by the Film and Publications Board, FPB. FPB is a content classification and regulation authority in South Africa, reporting to the Ministry of Communications and Digital Technologies. Among its many objectives, one is to protect children online and ensure their safe participation in digital campaigns. So each speaker will give their remarks, and we will then convene a joint discussion to probe some of the issues that were raised and allow you as participants to get involved. So please use your chat box and your Q&A functions to field or to pose any questions to our panelists. So to kickstart our Book to the Future webinar, we have the MDDA's Executive Manager in charge of Research, Training, Monitoring and Evaluation, Ms. Zukiswa Mqolomba, to give the opening remarks. Zuki, the stage is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. Can you hear me? Dear
Yes.
colleagues, can you hear me? Awesome. So good
Yes.
morning, dear colleagues. Good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you so much just for the opportunity to open and to initiate and to officiate our Book for the Future seminar today. This is our very first ever Book for the Future seminar, and we're looking forward to all the panelists who will be giving input on basically the importance of reading, not just in the media, but in society as large. A special warm welcome to our partners, the Film and Publications Board, the South African Center for Digital Language Resources, and the National Community Radio Forum. Welcome to today's discussions, and we look forward to your inputs and what you have to say today. Today is an important day, particularly for establishing and inculcating a culture and love for reading. Reading is particularly important for the media fraternity, as those who have a love for reading end up being even better writers as journalists, producers, and broadcasters, amongst other things. Journalists and those in media are no better human beings than the rest of us, but they carry an even bigger responsibility than others. Their reports can influence opinions and even elections. They can raise tensions and cause havoc in society. Their choices often affect people's lives in an existential manner. Key to this all is having a caliber of journalists that is well read, and people in the media who not only understand issues that are linked to their passions, but are also holistically informed about all that is happening in society and the country at large, particularly when it comes to the social, economic, and political components of society. So without a doubt, South Africa needs a stronger culture of reading. A survey of adults' reading behavior found that most adults spend an average of 4 hours per week reading, compared to 7.5 hours per week watching television or watching DVDs. And to make this even worse, South Africa is actually ranked last out of 50 countries in the 2016 Progress in International Reading Literacy study, which tested reading comprehension of learners in their 4th year of primary schooling. The study found that 78% of South African pupils at this level, which is the 4th year of primary schooling, could not read for meaning. Can you imagine? 78% of South African pupils in their 4th year of primary schooling cannot read for meaning. And South Africa is ranked last out of 50 countries in this international reading literacy study. And that is something that most importantly has to change in our lifetime. And just to ask you guys a few questions. When last did you read a good book? If you had to think about it, it's most likely been a long time. And writers should always be reading. Exposure to good writing will make you better at it. To fully benefit from its influence, you should be selective of what you read naturally, but only feed your subconscious with words worth being there. Because once they're in there, without even thinking about it, you'll start using them in your own writing and reporting. All knowledge known to humankind has been recorded in books and written texts,
Recording in progress.
including business books, newspapers, magazines, and historical accounts of people, places, things, and incidences. No matter what information you are seeking, the answers can be found in a book. The answers can always be found in reading. Don't just read one book and that's it. Read many books and sources to enrich your research and to enrich your knowledge sphere and your sphere of influence. Even reading blogs and websites can enhance your research and your ideas and quench your need for information. Human beings have been given a mind by God to make sure that they absorb all the information through their sensory organs, through eyesight, through hearing, just to make sure that you are capacitated, to make sure that you're able to live a life that is holistic. And reading actually enlarges your imagination and allows you to even think more broadly about society as you engage in different forms of knowledge and different forms of ideas which enrich your perspective of society. Most importantly, which enrich your own perspectives about your role in society at large. Reading not only can become a spiritual affair and an emotional affair when you have a love for it, but reading literally just enhances your intellectual capabilities and makes you have a better understanding of the world in which you live and how to interact with the different components of society, both social, political, economic, just to mention but a few. So read, read, read. Read as a journalist, read as a producer, read as a broadcaster, and that will enable you to be a better professional of providing a better service offering to the communities that we represent. Lastly, let me end my opening remarks by saying that every newsroom and basically also every single story must show why you deserve more trust than dozens of other people and hundreds of others on the same topic that you are currently addressing. So that is why you have to be well read, because you have an audience that is dependent on you to feed them with information that would actually enhance their lives and improve the quality of their lives through perception, imagination, thought leadership, and stuff like that. So please, let's take our responsibility as professionals in the media fraternity very seriously and ensure that we not only develop and inculcate a love for reading, but we ensure that our reading skills are enhanced so that we are able to produce better forms of information and better forms of ideas for those who consume our ideas in order to improve the quality of their lives. And that is why I think it's important for us as professionals in the media fraternity to read, to read, to read. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to what the panelists have to offer us. And I'll be joining in throughout the course of the day. I'll be here supporting the work of our organization through Litabo. And thank you, Litabo, for also having organized such a brilliant concept for the organization. I'm proud of the outputs of your leadership at work. And I'm trusting that today will even be a greater reason to celebrate what we do as an organization, as MDDA. Thank you so much, and I wish all the panels the best of luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zukiswa, for those opening remarks. You have given us a lot to digest, and you've also shared some stark statistics that should really concern all of us in the media fraternity and also society at large. But we will dive deeper into that discussion much later in the seminar. It's time to welcome our first panelist from the South African Centre for Digital Language Resources, Ms. Leonie van der Berg, who's the Communications Manager at SADiLaR. Welcome, Leonie.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you very much for organizing this initiative. I'm very glad to be here. I'm sorry our Executive Director, Prof. Langa Khumalo, couldn't meet with us today, but he has a steering committee meeting that he has to attend to. So, but I'll be taking over. I'm the communications manager at the South African Centre for Digital Language Resources, and I'm quickly going to share my screen just to give a short introduction to SADiLaR, and then where I think we can maybe take hands and take some few ideas forward. So can I share my screen quickly? Sorry, I can't seem to share my screen. Okay, there we go. just get an indication if everybody can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, so the South African Centre for Digital Language Resources was announced by the Department of Science and Innovation as part of other research infrastructures. There's 13 research infrastructures that's funded by the Department of Science and Innovation, and SADiLaR is one of two in the humanities sector, and it's a first of its kind center in South Africa, in Africa. So SADiLaR is a multi-entity. We are based at the Northwest University, but we have a multiple nodes that work with us and that do work for us. So we have a node at the University of Pretoria within the Department of African Languages. We have a node at the University of South Africa within the Department of African Languages, the CSIR HLT, Human Language Technology Research Group, the Northwest University Center for Text Technology, the Interinstitutional Center for Language Development and Assessment, also known as ISALDA. And then our latest node has been developed at the Stellenbosch University, the Child Language Development Node. So SADiLaR, our main focus at SADiLaR is to develop and promote all the official languages of South Africa to be capable of expressing all forms of knowledge and drive their use and function in research and development, education, social transformation, trade, economic, and scientific development. To give you an idea what is happening at the various nodes, we have a speech processing node. They work with core technologies that allow for the creations of text-to-speech technologies and applications. That is based at the CSIR. I will show you an example of an application that they've developed for health practitioners amidst this COVID crisis. Then we have the text processing node. They work with core technologies to provide machine translation systems, spelling checkers, and online dictionaries. That is the Center for Text Technologies based at the Northwest University. They've created multiple spelling checkers for all South African languages and also various machine translation systems for the government. For example, the Automato translation systems that assist the language practitioners within the department. Then we have the language and teaching testing node. Outreach from this node aim to improve academic literacy in South Africa by providing instruments and multilingual academic literacy resources. And that is the ISALDA node. And then the terminology and WordNet development node is the UNISA node. WordNet assists to disambiguate different senses of a word in context and is used as part of machine translation, information retrieval, and sentiment analysis. Our digitization node is at the University of Pretoria. The digitization analog material is important, especially to increase the availability of resources for our languages that allows for further downstream refinement as part of, for example, text processing activities. Now my screen seemed to freeze. Then our latest or new node is the Child Language node that is at the Stellenbosch University. The main function of the Child Language Development node is to promote research on child language development in all South African languages and the digitization of child language development data, so that all of the data is freely available for SADiLaR on the SADiLaR platform on our research infrastructure, so that scientists will be able to work on language cognition and child development, language learning, and language disorders. So all of that information will be made freely available on the SADiLaR platform to do research from, and then also to develop the languages. So now I'm quickly going to stop my share. Sadilar also have been involved in various other projects. And I think I'm going to touch on a few projects that I think will be related to our crowd here today. And maybe we can have a discussion afterwards about this as well. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me first tell you more about the Book Dash project that Sadilar has been involved in. So Sadilar was a funder of the Hack Your Culture initiative that was hosted last year by the Goethe Institute and the Credible. Credible were the project managers of this initiative, and there were hackers all across Africa that worked together on various GLAM institutes. So that is the galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. So they brought together all creative minds and tech enthusiasts to collaborate, to give to be creative and to develop a product or an end product to assist the GLAM institutes to get a better audience, and especially in the time of COVID. So during this initiative, the Culture Code group worked on the Book Dash initiative. So for those of you not known to Book Dash, it's an online, I'm quickly going to share my screen to show you their website. So it's an online, let me just close that one. It's an online book library that's freely available. So you can maybe just have a look. I'll put it in the chat. So they worked on this initiative, and they created they picked a book, and they have created an online game that will be freely available in all the South African languages, but it's to improve reading, it's to promote reading, and it's also to help the caregivers of toddlers and the youth, to assist them and to enhance their reading skills. So I'm quickly going to show you a video about this initiative. Sadilar was the funder of the translations and was also involved during the whole Hack Your Culture initiative with the judging thereof, as well as some funding during the time. So this is just a short explanation of the book. Let me wonder, I should just say share my sound as well, and then I'm gonna play. Okay, so this book will be available. Get out there. The book will be available shortly, and it's an online game, and as I said, this will be available in all the South African languages. They are bound to launch this game end of September, and there you can see it will be in all the official languages. The toddler will type in his name, and it will create this whole experience as well. So this is truly an amazing a way that we can show how technology, language resources, translations can come together and really have a great impact, and also to get the word out there in a technological way. So I'm going to put the link also in the chat. Let me stop my share. If you'd like to be informed when this game will be launched, you are more than welcome to click there and just type in your details. You won't be spammed. You will just receive when this book is launched. So that is something that we are very excited about and to be a part of. And then another thing that I would like to share is our website and our social media for everybody to get in touch to get in touch with us. So let me just share my screen again. So this is the SADiLaR website. It's available at www.sadilar.org. You can see all the projects that we are involved in, the nodes, and there's a video for each node to tell you more about what they are busy doing with and how they are involved. Then there's our latest events, and here is a video on the COVID-19 project that we work with the mobile app for the health practitioners. And then also we have various training workshops that we host for the people in the humanities, with digital humanities, language resource workshops. The contact us, everything there is on our page, and you can also find us on all the social media platforms. So on our email is info@sadilar.org. Our Facebook is South African Center for Digital Language Resources. Our Twitter handle is SADilar_ZA, and our Instagram is SADilar_ZA. So thank you very much for the time and to introduce SADiLaR to the audience. And I hope that we can maybe catch up later during the session if there's any questions, or if you want to collaborate on a project, that will be great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Leonie. I think you've shared some really amazing resources. When we get into our discussion, I think everyone would love to know more about your book Dash initiative, and how it's accessible, and how caregivers are also how caregivers can be supported in making it accessible to children in their communities and in their homes. So I'm really excited that we'll be able to delve into that a little bit later. So it's time to welcome our second speaker, our second panelist, who is Thabang Pusoyabone, the Secretary General of the NCRF. Welcome, Thabang. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you to the speakers who are part of the panel. Well, community radio is an important vehicle in the community, a vehicle for development. We believe that all the social issues in the community, community radio has got a role to play. I represent an organization called the National Community Radio Forum, which is a membership-based organization. The National Community Radio Forum has got members across different provinces, in all the 9 provinces. Must I proceed?
Should I tell it like now? Hi, Karabo. Do you mind just muting your mic so that we can have the panelists speak? Thank you.
Thank you. So we are very much excited to be at this platform, invited by the MDDA, to talk about the importance of book reading, the importance of literacy. And I speak from the position and the knowledge that there is so much empowerment that can be derived from this project. And as the National Community Radio, we want to support this project because we know that media literacy interventions are so important to the development, especially if they are started when people are still young, because it assists with critical thinking, it assists with knowledge, and knowledge leads then to people making correct decisions, people being able to have an inquisitive mind, people being able to be critical whenever they are even presented with information, because we are living in the time where access to information has become so huge, and with the advent or with higher access to internet, people are confronted with a lot of information. Some of it is factual information, and some of it might be misleading or fake content. Now, if people read good content, they read good books, arms them with correct tools to be able to apply critical thinking and to be able to question whenever they have got content that is placed before them, to know whether this information is factual or this information is misleading. But what do we do as community radio to develop or to support book reading or literacy program? You would find that at many community radio stations, there would be children programs. It's part of our mandate, part of the promises of performance that many community radio stations would make when they apply for licenses. So the content then that needs to be carried for young people or for kids would involve where community radio stations form partnerships with local libraries, and they do basic book reading on their show, on the children's shows. And some of this would be where the creches are included to ensure that children are taught to read and to practice the culture of reading, and we inculcate that to them as young as they are, from very, very young age. At a higher level, we then do book reviews, and this would be done in partnership with local bookstores or with local book reading clubs, etc. Because we understand the value that a nation that is well read would be able to add in resolving the challenges and the problems of society. So it is something that adds to the improvement of citizens' capacity to be able to identify when there is false news, when there are programs that needs to be raised, that leads to awareness. They are able to participate. And as community radio, then we are able to enter that space to say, how do we ensure that we do away with disinformation, or we empower our communities to be able to understand or to be able to be well prepared to discern when the information is harmful to them or when the information is not harmful to them. Because sometimes the people that we talk to are from marginalized groups, are from marginalized areas. And if they are not well armed, they don't have advocacy groups that we see in well-off communities where people talk for them. But reading is able to arm them with that correct information to know what it is that they need to do, to look for proper evidence when they need to to hold their people accountable that they have elected into position. So this is why we then support this program. Thank you very much. We would be able to participate when there are questions at a later stage.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tabang. Also some fascinating insights. It sounds like a lot is being done on the ground, and later on we'll also just unpack the impact of some of those initiatives and also just touch on the role of community media itself. For our third panelist from the FPB, the Film and Publications Board, is Lynette Kameneth, the Communications Manager at FPB. Welcome, Lynette.
Hi, thank you so much. Let me just switch my screen on so I can say hello to everyone. Can you hear me? I have unmuted, so I'm hoping I am audible. And then I also just want to share my screen. So I'm just going to saying hi to everyone. I'm going to take my video off just for a second and then share my screen with you. Okay, please let me know if that's up. So thanks so much to the MDDA for inviting us along to present to you today. As I was introduced, I'm the Communications Manager at the Film and Publication Board. So I wanted to take the opportunity today to just tell you a little bit more about us. I know quite a few people don't know the organization, but I wanted to also then talk to you about the impacts of the type of work that we do, especially when it comes to the media sector and the creation of content. Specifically, not so much in terms of literacy as in reading, but I want to focus a lot more on the literacy when it comes to the digital space. As both of our speakers before me have indicated, you know, there is quite a big move into that space at the moment. So just to kick off, what is the power of words and images? I think the majority of our people on the webinar today are from the community media space. And I think you will all be familiar with the power that words and images have. And I think Tabang has also now mentioned just before me how much power we actually have in the media space, especially. So if you look at the sort of the history of people on Earth, we've always been telling stories, right? And stories are how we relate to each other, but also how we share information and how we communicate ideas to each other. So if you come to the age that we're in now, the digital age, that information and the sharing of information is becoming a bigger and bigger part of our world. If you look at previous years, you know, media were one of the major gatekeepers of information. There were also obviously other gatekeepers like, you know, if you were from a wealthier family, you had more access to information, whereas now that information is there for anyone. And that tradition of telling stories, whether it's through books and the written word or whether it's through images, is something that is gaining a lot more power. It's always been powerful in society, but it's gaining a lot more power. So the second quote I have there also talks to us about the power that our stories can have either to break people or to make people. So stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. And if you're looking at our background in South Africa, I think that is a very powerful statement. We have so many social ills, you know, relics from the past that we are still trying to battle with. And the power of words and images in that space, it actually, you can't put a value to it. So what do we do at the Film and Publication Board, and why am I sort of talking to you today on this platform about literacy? So we, as we were introduced, we are a regulator of content, and we specifically regulate the films, games, and publications sector. And we look at regulating on a number of platforms or number of aspects. The prime one is the protection of children, but then we also provide consumer advice, and our law actually also makes child pornography a criminal offense. So if I can just, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the triangle at the back of a DVD cover or on a cinema poster. Those are the age ratings and the consumer advisories that we as the Film and Publication Board actually put onto materials. So as I was saying, those are films and games, but also in terms of publications. We don't regulate in the entire space of publications. So for example, a newspaper wouldn't fall under us, but our publications that we look at would be things like if a member of the public gets hold of a book or a magazine or a piece of artwork that they find to be either offensive or that they feel could be harmful to society, they are then able to also come to the Film and Publication Board, and we can also then provide that sort of consumer advice. So the most important thing is that we advise the consumer, so we don't censor. We don't cut parts out of books. We basically put an age rating and a consumer advisory onto the various materials, and that is then up to the choice is then up to the viewer or the consumer whether they want to participate or not. So as I was saying, the protection of children is our main goal. And this is why I'm so grateful to our partnership that we have with the MDDA and with various other organizations in the country, because the protection of children, especially from harmful content and harmful materials, is not something that the Film and Publication Board as a regulator can do by ourselves. So when we're looking at the content that children consume, the parents have a role to play, lawmakers have a role to play, anybody who's a caregiver or who is a gatekeeper of information, such as our community media sector. Everyone has a role to play in working towards a society where our children are protected. And I'll just touch a little bit later on the types of sort of harmful content that we talk about. So how do we do the assigning of consumer advisories? We have a process called classification. So I didn't put anything here on our legal framework. It's very dry and boring sometimes. So I wanted to just give you a quick little oversight on how we work. So we have something called classification guidelines. And this is what our team of classifiers use to determine what is age appropriate in the content. As I was saying, mostly films and games, but also publications. And a lot more of that is moving online. So those guidelines that we use, we actually thoroughly research and benchmark them. Every 5 years, we basically re-look at the classification guidelines. But within those 5-year periods, we also do something called a convergence survey, which I'll also touch on a little bit later. That is how we go out to the public and assess whether the ratings that we actually are assigning, they still speak to, our values and our norms in society. And obviously our classification framework also then fits within the laws of South Africa, specifically the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which talks to our various freedoms. As well as specifically our Film and Publication Amendment Act, where we look at things that are especially illegal, such as hate speech, incitement to violence, propaganda for war, and child pornography. So these are the age rating symbols that many of you will be familiar with. I think it's pretty standard across a lot of countries. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but that's just to show you that, we have an old rating, which means that it's suitable for all ages. We also have a PG, which we attach to certain age ratings. And that basically just means that the content is of such a nature that it could upset sort of younger and sensitive viewers if it's not, if a context is not provided by an adult that's watching with them. We then also have your 7 to 9 category, which means anyone under the age of 7 to 9. So they, it's not suitable for them. And as I was saying, these guidelines are researched. So we look at child psychology models and theories, as well as the law when we're putting this together. We also have then your 10 to 12, your 13 and your 16 age rating. So as a child develops, they have better cognition, and they have a better sense of how the world works. And they are then able to consume materials that are of a sort of more complex nature. I also then wanted to just talk about the classifiable elements. So I'm just using the 18 category as an example, but obviously for children, these would then be accompanied by your 7 to 9, your 10, your 12, your 10, your 13, and your 16. But if you look at it there, you'll see all those letters, our little alphabet soup of classification. So L, V, N, S, VS, we also have, a few others like P for prejudice. So I think everybody's familiar with those. It's language, violence, nudity, sex, sexual violence, which is the SV. And these sort of are aligned to what we have discovered in our research. The areas where adults, especially in the country, feel that children could, be harmed. So, for example, you'll see the sexual violence category was something that was added in later years. It wasn't always part of our alphabet soup. We used to have just an S or just a V. But because of the society we live in, a couple of years ago, probably about 3-4 years ago now, we went out and we spoke to various members of the public and civic organizations to get a sense of how do people think that the content that a child is exposed to affects their behavior in later life. And especially the fact that so many of our children are exposed to abusive relationships in the home where, maybe the mother is being abused. So that SV category was added afterwards, basically because there was a need in society. And because of the sort of high crime stats that we have in the gender-based violence field. So just to give you a sense as sort of, media, people in the media, these are some of the trends that we've been seeing in the last 3 years or so. And you will notice that there's a lot of content. So the slide that I've got up is our film age ratings. And you'll see there's a lot of content being produced for your older child. There's also quite a bit on the other side of the spectrum, which is all ages or parental guidance. But you'll see in the middle there's not a lot of content being produced specifically for children. So when we're talking about children accessing information and learning about the world, honing their skills as future adults, that is sort of the age category where we are lacking in the amount of information that the amount of appropriate information that we're putting out for our children in South Africa. And that is also as a content creator, that is also then a potential avenue for you to create content in that space. I also wanted to just quickly reflect on gaming, where we see a similar trend. You'll see again there 10 to 12, 10, that sort of age. There's not a lot of content being produced. And as we heard, the first speaker was talking about turning, a book, a source of information for children into a digital format, so a game, for example. And what I want to show you on the next slide is the consequence of that gap that is there for those younger children. In that we did a study with UNISA some time ago now in Gauteng and in Polokwane. And this was what we found, that some of the younger children, we basically asked them, what is your favorite game? And then we looked at what is the age rating of those games. And you'll see very, very few of them are playing your lower age ratings and your PG age ratings. Bulk of them are playing games that are way above their age limit. And that does have an impact on their development, on their behavior in life. So I also just wanted to share just, sort of some excerpts from other studies that were done, where we are seeing things like violence in media is more appealing to younger people compared to older people. And that, I think, is because children have a tendency to want to be older. You know, they aspire to, or they look up to role models that are older than what they are. So if your older brother is playing the school game, for example, with a lot of violence in it, our children are also more likely to want to play that. We also see here participants who viewed the graphic version of violent media experienced stronger negative emotional reactions, such as anxiety, worry, being frightened, and that also has an impact on a child's psychological development. We also, just that last comment there, it can be predicted that this might lead to heightened aggressive behavior. Now, it's not something we can say there's a one-to-one correlation that if a child plays a violent game or watches a violent film, that they will be more aggressive, but there is a very high likelihood of that. So just to come then to a bridge over to the digital age, right? I wanted to also then touch on the fact that we can't get away from the fact that society is moving into, or has already moved into, this digital age. I know in South Africa, we are still to some extent catching up because of our broadband and our access to data for disadvantaged communities, those sorts of things. But for us, digital literacy is definitely the way to go. It's the way that content consumption and content creation is moving. Many of you guys in the media space will know that you can't just have a book or a newspaper or a magazine now. You have to have an electronic version of it, an online version of it as well, to be able to reach the your consumers. So just some stats from the PwC does a couple of research studies in the media and entertainment field every year. This is their sort of global one, where they're looking at consumption trends and forecasting from 2021 to 25. And they're seeing that at least 1.1 billion households globally have fixed broadband in 2020, and that was an increase of 3.4% over the previous year. 4.6 billion smartphone connections in the world, right? 6.5% increase. They're also noting that there's an increase in popularity of user-generated content, and for a content regulator across the world, that is actually a space where we don't have the solutions yet. But how do you regulate user-generated content, such as your TikToks or other videos on like YouTube or games for that matter, that people are creating and that they are distributing themselves? We also see there an increase, and I think you can see it in South Africa as well, in global subscription video on demand services. Those are things like your Netflixes, where people are paying for content on demand. Also in the game sector, an increase of 10% in 2020. And then also they are predicting that data consumption will continue to increase, and it will continue to fuel an increase in online consumption of content. So things like over-the-top videos, music, radio, podcasts, video games, and esports. Okay, so what is the problem with that? Why do we want to put sort of measures in place to be able to regulate that? I think this slide basically is just a summary of some of the things that we feel are important. The first one being that children are more reliant on the internet, and the past 2 years has shown us that with the social distancing, that this is becoming more and more prevalent. that more and more children have access to some sort of a digital device, even if it's just a smartphone. Even in our rural and more disadvantaged areas, we find that the Film and Publication Board does a lot of education on digital literacy, specifically in our communities. And we've noticed that wherever we go, even if it's in the most rural places, children at least have either their own phones or access to a phone in the household. So then another one of the things we wanted to highlight was that children don't understand the real life impact of engaging virtually, and this puts them in danger then in the online space if they're not educated on the digital space, if there's no digital literacy programs. And it's one of the things that we work closely with the MDDA on, is when we're doing education in our communities, that we also try and, expand the footprint by using our the platforms that our community radio and our other community media offer us. So also just to touch on the fact that when a child is going online for a specific reason, a parent has allowed them access, for example, to YouTube. There are also still pop-up ads and people who have darker ulterior motives that are lurking around there, wanting to, be a predator and expose these children to things that are not appropriate for their age. That's also where our fight against child pornography comes in, because we're finding that globally there is more children that are being targeted online, because it's a space where your predators can be anonymous, so that's how they end up grooming children these days, is very clever and very knowledgeable about the digital platforms. The other thing then to touch on is cyberbullying. It's maybe not as related to our topic today, but also something that we look at, the impact of screen addiction, as they call it, and how it affects depression in children. We're also seeing increases in suicides in children and the youth. So that also comes with access to the digital space and sort of supports us in our quest to actually increase digital literacy for South African children. So just to highlight the freedom of expression in our constitution and our Bill of Rights is there to protect certain freedoms such as the press and media, freedom to receive information, freedom of creativity and artistic and scientific endeavors. But then also there are specific rights. So what we do is make sure that content that has propaganda for war, incitement to violence, advocacy of hatred based on race, ethnicity, gender, religion, is something that we look out for when we are classifying, and that we look out for, and we urge the public to, if it's content, for example, that's user generated that we don't regulate, we also have that door open where the public can come to us, and we work with the internet service providers to get rid of that content, to take the content down, and also to work with law enforcement to then, try and bring people that are trying to influence others in a negative way in society are brought to book. That also then includes, like I was saying earlier, the creation, possession, and distribution of child pornography. This is something that we specifically look at as the Film and Publication Board. So not to take up too much time, I just wanted to touch on our convergence survey. We've actually just finished one in 2020. In the middle of the pandemic, but we managed to complete it. And this is the survey that I was talking about, where we try and look at what are the trends coming out in South Africa on how people consume content, but especially how they ensure that there's safe consumption of content, especially for their children. So what we basically do is we benchmark our classification guidelines against the norms and standards in South Africa. So just a few slides, if you'll bear with me, on that convergence survey. You'll see that we went countrywide. We had something like 7,000 respondents, and we went to every single province in South Africa. We had quite a large team of student researchers that went out for us to gather information, but we managed to cover a large part of the country so that our sample could be, quite useful. And then I just wanted to show a few slides on the stats that came out. This is checking how many of the adults that we surveyed actually spend time watching television with their children. So even though the Film and Publication Board doesn't regulate in the television space, we thought this would be an interesting trend as well to take a look at. So you'll see that, and this is quite a good result, is that most adults actually spend half of the time that their children are watching television with them, supervising, making sure that the content is actually appropriate for them. We then look at, the types of sites where adults don't feel that their children should be when it comes specifically to the internet, and we see that, and this is quite something we found in previous studies as well, that people put a high value on keeping children away from adult material such as pornography and your various adult sites. But then you see also not as high an amount, but some people also then make sure that their children are consuming safely on social media and your news sites, emails. But the major focus for adults is aligned to what we then put an S, an N, or a V on, right? We also then looked at how much time children are allowed to spend on their mobile devices. And this sort of, we broke down by several categories as well. And you'll see there that some of the time and most of the time comes out the highest. So it's also just an indication that our children are firstly spending time online, but most importantly being allowed by their adult supervisors to spend time online. We also looked at how people are basically controlling the access to various online sites, and you'll see there that in your metro areas, most of them are just spending time checking and supervising, whereas in your sort of peri-urban, small town, rural villages, there's no controls that are happening, and that for us is something that is very concerning, because, while the digital space is an amazing area for children to gain knowledge, to learn about the world, to educate themselves, entertain themselves, if it's being done without any controls, then the chances of those children being exposed to harmful content, and more especially harmful people, when it comes to your sort of people grooming children for child sexual abuse material, that is a very, not a very good picture for us. Also, just very quickly to look at video games, how often parents actually play the video games that they buy for their children before their children play it or while their children are playing it. And we'll see there that the bulk of the people basically were saying that yes, they do. So you'll see, for example, I think it was in the Western Cape where it was quite high for people that actually do. But you also see a large number of people, a majority of people actually that don't monitor what the games that their children are playing. This also was just for us a bit of validation of whether the work we're doing is valuable to society and is aligned with society. And we see there that a very large number of people find our ratings that we give to content useful. So that for us is a good indicator and something that we will then build on. So just to end off with, I always sort of end with some tips for our adults and caregivers and parents on how to monitor what your children are doing. And as I was saying previously, the digital space is an amazing place for children to learn, but it needs to be done within boundaries. So we, for instance, recommend that you have monitoring apps on your children's devices. You can basically see what websites they're logging on to. You can limit the amount of time that they spend, because screen addiction is also a very real problem for children. You can also set alerts where the app will then tell you when a child is trying to access or download an app that is not good for them, not safe for them. And you can then also grant permissions for children to download the apps. We're also saying that always supervise your children when they're online. Know what games they're playing, know what videos they're watching, look at the platforms that they're accessing and the type of content, but not just the type of content that is being placed on these platforms by your content creators, but also the types of adverts that are popping up. We find a lot of adverts for like your adult sites, for example, that would pop up on children's devices. So also, be aware of what type of adverts a platform is allowing onto their sites. And then also the internet, as I was saying, educational, fun, entertaining, but there are also criminal elements that are out there. So teach our children as well not to share personal information and to be wary of people, wanting to engage with them and, warning them that that person might not be of a certain age or who they say they are. So also assist your children to identify activities and people that make them feel uncomfortable and to report that. I think a child that is in a family situation where there's open dialogue and children can speak about these things, it's always a recipe for children being a lot safer. Just to come back to the issue of bullying and cyberbullying as well, teach children to always report anything that makes them uncomfortable to an adult, and that adult is then able to contact us at the Film and Publication Board and we can assist. I will put up our contact details a bit later. And then also ensure that you have age restrictions on your devices. So don't allow your children to just be able to access any site. Also use your monitoring apps to be able to set the age limits. So also, if your children have social media accounts, also check their privacy settings. Lots of the platforms have their own community standards, and you can set just about every single platform and app has got a setting where you can set what your child sees or what your child is exposed to as well. And that is what I had wanted to present to you today. Just my contact details there, especially on the community media side. I think we are always looking for ways to get the message of safe content consumption out there to the public, and we work a lot with community media when we do go into the different provinces. We also then have social media accounts that are listed there, and you're welcome to please follow us, engage with us, and also if you have any projects that are related to our work, we always welcome to create new partnerships with you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. That was very interesting remarks from all our panelists. So I think what we'll do now is just start from quite a fun place, something that Zukiso and Lynette touched on. So this is a question to our three panelists about the power of stories and how a book can break or empower us. So if our panelists can share with us what book they're currently reading or what book has positively impacted your life. And then we can get into the nitty-gritties of the individual presentations. So who would like to start? Lynette, are you good to start?
Yes, so I have a bit of an eclectic taste in books. So I read a lot of like your murder mysteries and that sort of thing. I think it's the sort of journalist in me that always wants to solve things. I basically studied journalism before I went into PR. But one of the books I'm reading at the moment is more on the self-help side, which is it's called A New Earth, and I think some people might know about it. It's more about self-development and finding your purpose in life and living your purpose, that sort of thing.
Awesome. By Eckhart Tolle. Hey, I love that
That's
book.
the one. Yeah, that's the one. I was only just recently introduced to him, but I'm really enjoying that book.
All the best. And Thabang, can we come to you? What book has positively shaped you?
Well, I think it would have to be creating winning teams. The winning teams in the sense of the employees or the working teams. I think I found this book to be very encouraging, helpful in ensuring that you know how to motivate your teams, how to motivate your staff, because we have got a bad sense of thinking what motivation is. And when you read that book, it really tells you, to forget about the things that you always thought motivation was, and it introduces you to a new way of building teams and motivating them in a sense that they themselves begin to take the goals of the company and drives them forward.
Amazing. That sounds really inspiring. Liane?
Well, I'm also during the lockdown, I must say I delved into also, I think, a bit of a murder mystery spy book. It's the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series, and I really enjoyed that a lot. And I actually finished a book now by Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist, and it's a bit more how should I put it? It lets you think a lot. So I haven't been into the motivational books. And I have 2 toddlers, so it's quite difficult to read as well. So that's me.
Okay, great. Maybe I should also share mine. I actually have it here with me. This is a book that I'm currently reading called Girl, Woman, Other. Also very interesting. I just started it, but very interesting book around the lives of women based in Britain. Short stories, but really fascinating and interesting. So I think maybe because our participants are mostly caregivers and people working in the media space, I'll just kickstart us off with 2 questions and then open it up to the participants. The Book Dash initiative, right, which is an online resource, I think requires a certain level of digital literacy from caregivers. So maybe if you can share with us, how does Sadilla support caregivers and give them the confidence to get into that online space? Knowing the socioeconomic conditions that we live in, and that caregivers are mostly, they are grannies, they're full-time moms who are perhaps less digitally savvy than the people that they are entrusted to protect. So, how is the focus on equipping and empowering caregivers to, be comfortable in online resources?
Okay, I actually need Amy, the project leader, to maybe lead this discussion. So basically, the Book Dash is one of the institutes that formed part of the Hack Your Culture project, and they aren't that well known. So the part for the caregivers the book is going to be an app, and it's going to be an interactive app, and you will be able to download it from Google Play or the iStore, and there will be a specific guide in the app for caregivers to assist them in how the app is working. So I think that the thing with the digital maybe backlog is something that still needs to be addressed. But I think it's a very easy game to play. It's not difficult. And yeah, so I think Amy would have had a better way to describe this. We were basically, we formed part of the translation team, and we provided funding for that. So maybe that is something that I can follow up with her and just send an email out on specifically the caregiver section of the app.
Okay, great. And then Lynette, one of the, you ended off your presentation with some practical tips around, the tools that caregivers need to familiarize themselves with to protect children under their care. So if you could probably help us think through how do we, manage those tools, and how do we manage in households where you're raising children of different ages. So how should caregivers be thinking through the different levels of regulation or supervision for children of different ages who are perhaps sharing the same space, but as your the classifications that you mentioned, it requires us to think differently about children of different age groups. But the reality is that in communities we are raising those children in the same space. So how would we support caregivers in thinking those different imperatives through?
That's a very, very interesting question. I think what we do as the Film and Publication Board when we go out on our education road shows is we always also focus on your parents and your caregivers. So, for example, we would have a session with the children to explain to them on their sort of level, whatever age they are, that what is safe and what is not safe. But we also then usually have linked to that a session with your parents and your caregivers in a community, or if we don't have access to them, we would then work with the trainers in an NGO to equip them to then be able to take that message out. So one of the things that we always tell parents is that the very first and most important thing is for you as a parent to realize that your child has certain limitations due to their age, right? So we would, in a situation where you have more than one age group in a house, you wouldn't then, because you know what the rating of a film or a game is, you wouldn't allow the young ones to be around when the older ones are watching or playing games, for example. So if it's a very violent game, you would then put your parameters in place in your own household, where your older ones are only allowed to play those games when the little ones are sleeping or when they're not around. And the same thing with films. But I think also, so basically what I'm saying is that it's the most important thing is the awareness amongst parents. And it's also why, we are so keen to work with our community media sector to just get that message out as far and as wide as possible. I think some of the statistics that we gathered when we were doing our convergence survey shows that there is already, while people don't know who Film and Publication Board is necessarily, all of them, the vast majority of them actually know the triangle. It is something that, there's a lot of awareness about. So I think parents already know that there are certain forms of content that are not safe for their children. And it's just a matter of having that open space. This is also some advice that we always give, is that create that space for dialogue in your household with your children, with, even if you're an aunt to your siblings' children, also create that sort of open space for dialogue. And don't just say to a child, you can't play this because I said so. Explain to them what are the dangers. Explain to them when they're older that they'll understand the content a lot better. Also, when you look at, the exposure that our children today have when it comes to things like social media platforms, and if you look at the amount of sort of cyberbullying that happens. If you've got that open space with your children where they know they can talk and you explain things to them, then they are much more likely to come to you and say, oh, this advert popped up here while I was watching this, while I was on this platform, or I've received this text and people are making me feel uncomfortable, that they're a lot more likely to then come to you and tell you about it. And then you are there to assist them through it. You know, there are also lots of people that provide help. So when we go out and we talk in communities about child sexual abuse material, which is basically your child pornography, we also then take along NGOs in that area that will be able to assist people that have gone through it, you know, victims of something like this. So as FPB, because our space is in regulation, we aren't really experts in being able to give sort of psychosocial care to somebody that's a victim. But we do have a very big connection of people that can assist. And we do the same thing when somebody comes to us and says, for example, you know, my child was playing and this website has got content that we, you know, is probably not appropriate. Can you assist us to get rid of this? We would then work with our service provider, internet service providers, to take the information down, you know. So I think there's such a wide network of people working in the sort of digital literacy space that there's always someone you can also, as a caregiver, go to for advice, or go to help a child that is being bullied or being targeted by, you know, for online grooming. Yeah, so I think it's a long answer, but basically that open relationship with your child is the most critical.
Definitely a lot to think about there. Now, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about, you know, the work that the NCRF does and the kind of synergies when it comes to public awareness. You know, you mentioned that the biggest thing is for caregivers to be able to be aware of what, you know, their children are, or, you know, their children are engaging in. But also the one thing I'm thinking of is, Thabang, from an NCR perspective, you mentioned, it sounds as though your biggest strength in the community sector is your ability to be on the ground, right? You said you're still working in traditional libraries. So I'm wondering, what has been the impact of, you know, those activities, on the ground activities, especially in the face of increased national priorities around digital resources and what Lynette touched on earlier on screen addiction? How are you balancing the need to still, you know, go to traditional libraries when children have increasingly more accessible on devices? So how are you balancing those imperatives, and what role are you seeing community radio stations play in that?
Well, I think let me start by giving you this example. In 2020, the Department of Education had lost a lot of classroom time due to lockdown. And they came to the sector. We talked about the partnership between community radio and the Department of Basic Education, where after forming that, we used community radio to supplement a classroom-based literacy program. Now, what that did is that we were able to see during that period that learners were able to record the lessons on their cell phones. They were able to play that recording during their own time. And they could rewind whenever they wanted to. There's a concept that they couldn't understand clearly. They could rewind, listen again. And some of the community radio stations put out those shows as podcasts on their digital platforms. And learners could easily access those materials. Today, we look back and we can say, indeed, community radio contributed to the successful year for the department in 2020. So there are a lot of partnerships that we are able to build. Community radio is flexible like that. We are able to build these partnerships and say, what is it? Because we constantly have to think about what is it that would benefit the listener. And if there is something that is able to help the listener to achieve something better, that content can easily be brought into radio. And the advantage is that radio has been found to be very much effective. It already has the listener who's listening, and bringing that content would just add value. They are there for their news, they are there for their entertainment, they are there for the information. The advantage is being locally based as a community radio. You are able to focus to that local need. You are able to speak that local language of the listener. You can easily be understood. You can be involved in your community, but also more so you are able to involve the local people in the programming and the planning that you do, even the presentation of those programs. So community radio stations then have got that strong following because of that type of engagement with the community. And because of the high levels of credibility, because we are known, it's easier to trust information that comes from a radio station than information that you find in digital platforms, in the internet also. So those are the leverages that we have been able to garner to say, how do we ensure that whatever is important that is either on the digital platforms that we are able to bring into radio to make it more meaningful and impactful, but also how do we form partnerships with organizations like those that we have today here, and to ensure that we drive this type of literacy programs forward. If it means community development, we are interested.
I think this is an opportune time to take a round of questions. Desiree, I note your hand. We can take a round of questions, and if there are other questions or comments that you can share in the chat box. I see one from Angelique where she says it's not a question but an observation that in her role at the station she's found that over the last years journalism students are reluctant to report or develop content in their mother tongue or home languages. So students perceive the workplace as English, in inverted commas, and the entertainment aspect of media has become more appealing than the information and education aspect. Quite an interesting one. If our panelists want to respond to that, they are welcome to, but I think for now we can take Desiree.
Thank you, Kuzo. My question is actually just a follow-up on your first question regarding caregivers that are not so digitally savvy or that are digitally literate. So I know, Leanne, you said, or Liane, sorry, you said your project lead would probably be able to answer this question better. So I just have sort of a build up on that question that you could probably also then relate to her and sort of provide a full answer then when you come back to us. Because the Book Dash initiative, as you've explained, I think is targeted at your younger children. But I'm thinking that in your townships and in rural areas, for example, you'd find the younger children that are really not digitally literate, and they have caregivers that are also likewise illiterate. So are there any other initiatives then that are targeted to those, especially if you want to promote the mother tongue reading and communication? Thank you.
Okay. Are there any more questions before we go to our closing remarks? Okay, not yet. Okay, I have one more before we wrap up. And, one of the themes that has emerged in our discussions has been around making literacy objectives fun and through the use of video games. So perhaps either Lynette or Liane, perhaps you can share to us what is the importance of making reading, literacy games fun for young people.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to maybe touch on this. So just to state that again, the Culture Code that developed the game, we were only funders of the translations of the game. So we are in support of the game, and we really enjoyed the process of them through the Hack Your Culture initiative, that they came up with this brilliant idea to promote reading in such an active way. So for me, the answer to your question is the literacy that's going into or reading via games for the youth, I think is a very what is the word that I can use? I think it's a great way in the times that we are living in, to get children to read. Those who have access, and maybe hopefully one day it will be, I think in schools already, some schools has phones and things, they make use of technologies to drive education. So for us, it was a great way of supporting one type of way that we can boost reading within the youth. So that's why we got involved in this project. But overall, SADiLaR is not just involved in that. We are involved with various other projects. We have language projects, we have text-to-speech projects, we have this repository for researchers to assist them in their research. So SADiLaR is a research infrastructure in support of digitizing natural language processing. So I think when you look at SADiLaR, you should just not see the book dash. It's not our project, it's just something that we funded. I just wanted to make that clear. But we are in support of initiatives as that, and we have an open call for proposals for games like this, or for any other projects, if you would like to get in touch with us, so that we can see where we can take hands and maybe take projects forward. So I will maybe put the link in the chat as well. If you have a proposal, or if you have a project that needs funding within the scope that we support, then we can maybe tie hands and see how we can get our nodes involved, or if it's some of our technical specialists that work on a type of project like the Book Dash project, then we can see how we can tie the knots. I think it's good to collaborate on certain projects and get hands in where you need the specialists to come in. So yes, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I think maybe because I see there aren't any hands, I'll just do one last question that is based on the comment in the chat box about the importance of mother tongue or home languages. Thabang, from an NCRF perspective, what role do you see, because you're as a station manager or in stations, that's where you're also getting quite a lot of journalism students to come in. How are you using that space to promote home languages, mother tongue language use, because it's also in accordance with your ICASA license that, probably you're 65% isiZulu or Setswana. Are stations using their space in the community media sector to also really advance the agenda of mother tongue languages?
Well, I think I agree that there is propensity for the English usage from journalists. I think people really think that speaking English makes you intelligent, or you come across as intelligent, but and we have to fight that every day within our radio stations where we manage. We fight that every day. We have to stick to the license conditions, and we have to even remind them that the importance of radio is about being understood. If you can't be understood, then it does not serve any purpose. Radio has to ensure that the language it uses is the language that is spoken in that community. And it is the language that the community will be able to understand, because every program that you create it because you believe it will benefit the community. You don't create it because you want to show the people how intelligent you are. So that's we need to fight that. It's something that maybe it's not just a radio problem. I think it might be a societal problem, that every time when people want to communicate ideas, they want to communicate ideas in English, probably because it makes them sound smarter, but maybe because it's easier to communicate in English. I'm not sure, but we have to keep on informing the people that radio is only going to be relevant. It's only going to be effective when we speak in a language that people can understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our panelists and to our guests. I think what we've managed to do today is really hone in on the why. Why is this an important conversation to have? What are the ramifications for not having these conversations around literacy? The how, FPB shared some really practical tips on how caregivers, community content creators can be involved in ensuring that children are participating safely online. And in our chat section, Lynette has also put in some information about the Film and Publication Board, where you can contact them and how they're keen for collaborations. And also the WHO, we have delved quite a lot into the power of collaborations and how each stakeholder and each sector has a role to play in making sure that we're all promoting literacy and we're doing so safely. So on my end, thank you very much to the panelists for joining us and for helping us advance our first Book to the Future event. And I will call on Desiree, who is our research officer, to give the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuzo. And then the research unit would like to thank everybody that has taken out valuable time to be part of our of this workshop. Thank you to our facilitator who does a job. Thank you to all the speakers. We really learned a lot, and I hope attendants also gained new ideas on how to actually build on working on creating a culture of reading in their communities, and also promoting literacy. And I hope also for our participants who mainly make up community media, that you've seen opportunities to actually partner and strengthen relationships with all our speakers that are representing their respective organizations today. So thank you very much for your time, and do not forget our attendance. Do not forget to submit those claim forms for your data claims, so that we can speedily conclude that process. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.